The road home, a tale of loyalty beyond limits. Have you ever looked into the eyes of a dog and wondered what stories they could tell if only they could speak? What secrets, what journeys, what pain might lie behind those soulful eyes? For one German shepherd waiting silently outside a dilapidated building as dusk settled over Oak Ridge Harbor, those eyes told a story of unspeakable suffering and unbreakable hope. Blood matted his once glossy coat. His ribs pressed against skin that bore the angry patterns of deliberate cruelty. Yet there was something in the way he held himself head up despite his exhaustion, gaze fixed on the road ahead that spoke of a purpose beyond mere survival. This wasn't just any stray seeking shelter. This dog was waiting for someone. And fate, after 3 long years, was finally answering. Officer Marcus Reynolds slowed his patrol car as the amber glow of sunset illuminated the strange silhouette near the rusted gates of Pine Haven Animal Shelter. Something about the dog's posture, the vigilant stillness despite obvious exhaustion, triggered a flicker of memory. Perhaps it was instinct, perhaps something deeper, but Marcus felt compelled to stop. The moment their eyes met across the gathering shadows, the world seemed to freeze. A shiver of recognition ran through Marcus like an electric current, leaving him breathless. Impossible. It couldn't be. And yet, the road home, a journey begins. Oak Ridge Harbor had always been a place of two faces. Tourists saw the gleaming waterfront, the quaint local shops, the picturesque lighthouse standing sentinel at the harbor's edge. But Marcus Reynolds knew the other face, the struggling neighborhoods, the industrial district where abandoned warehouses provided shelter for activities best kept from daylight. The growing desperation that came with the town's declining fishing industry. For 8 years, Marcus had patrolled these streets, the last 5 with his canine partner Duke by his side. The German shepherd had been more than a working dog. He had been Marcus's shadow, his confidant, his compass when the world grew too dark. Their bond had been legendary within the department. Until the warehouse raid 3 years ago. Marcus still remembered that night with painful clarity. The tip about a major drug operation. The hasty planning. The chaos when the suspects started shooting. Duke had pursued one of the fleeing suspects into the maze of shipping containers near the harbor. The sharp crack of gunfire. Then, nothing. No barking. No sign of Duke. Just empty docks and the haunting lap of water against concrete. The search had lasted for weeks. The entire department had combed every inch of the harbor. Missing dog posters had been plastered across town. Marcus had barely slept, calling Duke's name until his voice gave out. But eventually, the search had been called off. Duke was presumed dead, likely shot and disposed of, in the harbor's depths. Marcus had never fully accepted it. How could he when there had been no body, no closure? The guilt had nearly destroyed him. He should have waited for backup. Should have kept Duke closer. Should have done 1,000 things differently. Now, standing before the battered, emaciated German shepherd at the shelter gate, Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. The dog's ears perked forward slightly, eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "Hey there," Marcus whispered, crouching slowly, extending his hand palm up the way he'd always greeted Duke. The scent of neglect hung heavy in the air between them, but Marcus barely noticed. His focus remained locked on the dog's eyes, intelligent, watchful eyes that held a glimmer of something beyond animal awareness. The German shepherd tilted his head, a hesitant recognition flickering across his gaze. Then, with painful slowness, he leaned forward and sniffed Marcus's outstretched hand. Marcus noticed the color, then worn and filthy, but still intact. With trembling fingers, He reached for the tarnished metal tag. Years of grime had obscured the engraving. His breath caught as he rubbed away the dirt with his thumb. DUK K9 UNIT mina soy KHARBORPD HANDL EROF FICERM REYNOLDS Duke? The name escaped Marcus's lips in a broken whisper. Is it really you, boy? The German shepherd's tail moved just once, just barely but enough to send a surge of emotion through Marcus that nearly brought him to his knees. There was no mistake. This was Duke. Against all odds, his partner had returned. But as the initial shock of reunion gave way to clarity, Marcus's jaw tightened. Duke's condition told a story of systematic abuse. The dog's once powerful frame was diminished, his coat dull and marked with scars that spoke of deliberate cruelty. These weren't the marks of a stray struggling to survive. Someone had done this to him. Fury bubbled up inside Marcus, a cold, focused rage that cleared his mind like winter air. Someone had taken Duke. Someone had hurt him. And whoever they were, they would answer for it. Marcus pounded on the shelter's door, his other hand resting protectively on Duke's head. A moment later, a young woman appeared, her eyes widening slightly at Marcus's uniform. Where did this dog come from? The woman her name tag read Lena glanced nervously at Duke, then back at Marcus. He was brought in about 2 months ago. Found wandering near Blackwater Industrial Park. Found? By who? I don't know exactly. One of our field workers. Is there a problem, officer? Marcus's eyes narrowed. This is Duke. He's a police canine who disappeared 3 years ago during an operation. He was my partner. Lena's expression shifted from confusion to shock. I had no idea. He didn't have any identification when he was brought in. He has a collar with a tag, Marcus interrupted, pointing to the very visible tag he'd just cleaned. And he would have been my copycat. Standard procedure for all K9 officers. Something flickered across Lena's face in certainty. Fear, guilt. Marcus couldn't quite place it. But his instincts, honed by years on the force, told him she knew more than she was saying. Look, I don't know anything about that, Lena stammered, shifting her weight nervously. I just worked the front desk. Maybe you should talk to Mr. Ryder. He handles intake. Then get him, Marcus responded, his voice leaving no room for argument. As Lena disappeared into the back of the shelter, Marcus knelt beside Duke again. The dog leaned against his leg, a gesture so familiar it made Marcus's throat tighten. "I've got you now," he whispered, running gentle fingers over Duke's scarred back. "Whatever happened, I'm going to make it right." Duke's amber eyes held his, seeming to understand every word. Despite his condition, there was still something unbroken in those eyes, a spirit that years of mistreatment had failed to crush. A door slammed, and Marcus looked up to see a weary man approaching, Lena trailing behind him. His expression was a careful mask of professional concern, but Marcus didn't miss the way his eyes darted to Duke and then away. "Officer Reynolds, I'm Calvin Ryder, shelter manager. Lena tells me there's some confusion about this dog." Marcus stood, positioning himself protectively beside Duke. "No confusion. This is Duke, my canine partner who disappeared 3 years ago. I want to know how he ended up here and what happened to him." Ryder shrugged, spreading his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "We get dozens of strays every month, officer. This one was picked up near Blackwater Park about 8 weeks ago. No tags, no chip detected. Standard procedure." "That's impossible," Marcus countered, his voice dangerously quiet. "He's wearing a collar with identification. He's my cropycat. And these scars," he gestured to Duke's body, "they didn't happen by accident. Someone did this to him." "Listen, officer," Ryder said, his tone shifting to something harder. "Animals come to us in all conditions. We don't always know their histories. Some people are cruel to animals. That's why shelters like ours exist." The explanation was reasonable, practiced, and entirely unconvincing. Marcus had interrogated enough suspects to recognize the careful dance of someone hiding information. "I want to see your intake records," Marcus demanded. "All of them. And I want to know who brought him in." "That would be confidential information," Ryder responded smoothly. "Privacy protocols." "Not when it concerns a police canine," Marcus countered. "Duke isn't just a pet. He's police property, and his disappearance was part of an active investigation." Something changed in Ryder's eyes, a calculated assessment, as if weighing how much trouble this situation might cause. "Fine," he finally relented. "Come back tomorrow. I'll have the paperwork ready." "But honestly, officer, there's not much to see." Marcus wasn't waiting until tomorrow. "I'm taking Duke now," he stated firmly, already reaching for his radio to call for backup and transport. "And I'll be back first thing in the morning for those records." Ryder's mouth tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Whatever you say, officer. The dog's yours." As Marcus helped Duke into the back of his patrol car, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong at Pine Haven Shelter. Duke's reappearance wasn't just a miracle, it was the first thread in a knot that, once pulled, might unravel something much bigger than a missing dog. Looking at Duke through the rearview mirror, Marcus made a silent promise. Whatever darkness had claimed the last 3 years of Duke's life, he would bring it into the light. Whatever scars marked his partner's body, he would find who put them there. And when he did, they would learn what happened when you hurt a member of the Oak Ridge Harbor Police Department. But first, he needed to get Duke home. Secrets beneath the surface. The veterinarian's expression grew grimmer with each passing minute of Duke's examination. "Dr. Vuk." Elena Patel had been the department's go-minus to veterinarian for years, treating canine officers with the same careful attention she would give human patients. Now her gentle hands moved methodically over Duke's scarred body while Marcus watched, his heart heavy. "These aren't just signs of neglect, Doctor," Patel said finally, her voice tight with professional restraint. Some of these injuries were inflicted deliberately. There's evidence of systematic abuse, electrical burns, lash marks that have healed poorly, even what appears to be cigarette burns on his haunches. Each word felt like a physical blow. Marcus clenched his fists at his sides, struggling to control his breathing. "But that's not all," she continued, pointing to several small scars on Duke's neck. "These are injection sites. Very precise, very regular. He's been sedated repeatedly, probably for extended periods." "Why?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dr. Patel shook her head slowly. "I can't say for certain. But this isn't random cruelty, Marcus. This is methodical. Someone was using him for something." She reached for a scanner and ran it over Duke's shoulder, where his microchip should have been. Nothing registered. "The chip's been removed," she confirmed. "That requires knowledge of where to look and surgical skill to extract without causing permanent damage. Again, not the work of ordinary animal abusers." Marcus stroked Duke's head gently, and the German shepherd leaned into his touch, eyes half-closed. Despite everything, Duke still trusted human contact, still trusted him. The thought made Marcus's throat tighten with emotion. "What about his overall health?" he managed to ask. "Malnourished but not critically. Some muscle atrophy from being confined. He's going to need a special diet, rest, and time to rebuild his strength drive." Patel's professional demeanor softened slightly. "But he's strong, Marcus. German shepherds are resilient. And whatever he endured, he survived it with his spirit intact. That says a lot about who he is." After getting detailed care instructions and medications, Marcus helped Duke into his personal vehicle. The drive to his small house near the harbor was silent, both men and dog lost in their own thoughts. Marcus's home had changed little in 3 years. Duke's bed still lay in the corner of the living room, his toys stored in a basket nearby, items Marcus had never had the heart to discard. Seeing Duke hesitate at the threshold, Marcus felt a fresh wave of grief for the time they'd lost. "It's okay, boy," he said softly. "You're home now." Duke entered slowly, his nose working as he reacquainted himself with scents from another lifetime. He limped to his old bed, sniffed it thoroughly, then turned in 3 careful circles before settling down with a heavy sigh. Marcus watched him, wondering what memories remained after 3 years of trauma. Did Duke remember their morning runs on the beach? The proud day he'd earned his canine certification? The countless hours they'd spent training together? Or had those memories been buried beneath the weight of whatever horrors had followed? Sleep didn't come easily that night. Marcus lay awake, listening to Duke's breathing from across the room, his mind racing with questions. What happened after Duke disappeared that night at the docks? Who had taken him, and why? What connection did Pine Haven Shelter have to all this? By morning, Marcus had a plan. While Duke slept, he made 2 calls, one to his sergeant, requesting personal days, and another to Detective Nora Chen, the most tenacious investigator in the department and one of the few people Marcus trusted implicitly. "I need your help," he told her without preamble. "It's about Duke." 2 hours later, Nora sat at Marcus's kitchen table, her dark eyes fixed on Duke with undisguised amazement. "I thought you were having some kind of breakdown when you called," she admitted, shaking her head. "But here he is. It's really him." "It's him," Marcus confirmed, setting down coffee for both of them. And I need to find out what happened to him. Nora's expression hardened. The shelter story doesn't add up. No tags? No chip? And those injuries. She took a sip of her coffee, thinking. We should start with the shelter records. I'm heading there this morning, Marcus said. Ryder, the manager, promised to have them ready. But I don't think we're going to get the truth from those files. Probably not, Nora agreed. But it's a starting point. While you're doing that, I'll run a deeper check on Pine Haven. Financial records, board members, complaints, anything that might raise flags. Marcus nodded gratefully. There's something else. Duke was supposedly found near Blackwater Industrial Park. That's nowhere near the docks where he disappeared. And it's not an area where strays typically gather. Blackwater? Nora frowned. That's mostly abandoned warehouses now. Perfect for activities that need privacy. She pulled out her notebook. I'll look into property records there too. Duke watched their conversation from his bed, his ears moving occasionally to follow their voices. There was an alertness in his eyes that seemed at odds with his physical condition, as if his mind remained sharp despite what his body had endured. He understands more than he can tell us, Marcus said softly, following Nora's gaze. If only he could talk. In a way, he already is, Nora replied. His scars, his condition, even where he was found, it's all part of the story. We just need to piece it together. An hour later, Marcus walked through the doors of Pine Haven Shelter, braced for resistance. The front desk was empty, but he could hear voices from the back room. He followed the sound, finding Lena in what appeared to be a storage area, arguing with Ryder. They fell silent immediately upon seeing Marcus. Officer Reynolds, Ryder recovered quickly, his smile not reaching his eyes. I wasn't expecting you quite so early. The records, Marcus reminded him bluntly. You said they'd be ready. Right, of course. Ryder gestured vaguely toward the front desk. Lena was just organizing them for you. Marcus turned his attention to Lena, who seemed unable to meet his eyes. Her hands fidgeted nervously with the hem of her uniform shirt. Is there something you want to tell me? Marcus asked her directly, using the gentle tone he reserved for witnesses who were afraid to speak. About Duke, or about how this shelter operates? Ryder stepped forward quickly. Lena doesn't know anything beyond basic intake procedures. As I told you, the dog Duke was brought in as a stray. No identification, no information beyond where he was found. That's not true, Lena blurted suddenly, her eyes darting to Ryder and then away. He had a collar. I saw it. The tension in the room thickened instantly. Ryder's expression darkened, but Marcus kept his focus on Lena, sensing she had more to say. Go on, he encouraged quietly. Lena swallowed hard. The man who brought him in, he wasn't one of our regular field workers. Said he found the dog near his warehouse and was told to bring him here specifically. Said we'd be compensated for taking him, no questions asked. And were you? Compensated, Marcus pressed. The shelter received a donation, Ryder cut in, his voice dense. Nothing unusual about that. People donate when they bring in animals all the time. $5,000 isn't a normal donation, Lena countered, gaining courage. And it wasn't the first time. There have been others animals brought in with specific instructions to keep them isolated, to not register them in the system. Ryder stepped toward her, his face flushed with anger. That's enough, Lena. You don't know what you're talking about. Marcus moved subtly between them. I think she does. And I think you're going to show me those special records now, the real ones. For a moment, Ryder seemed to consider refusing. Then his shoulders slumped slightly. Fine. But this is bigger than you realize, Officer Reynolds. Some things are better left alone. Not when it comes to Duke, Marcus replied firmly. Not when it comes to justice. Lena led them to a small office, unlocking a filing cabinet with keys she pulled from her pocket. These are the real intake forms, she explained, handing Marcus a slim folder. The ones that don't make it into the official system. The form for Duke contained information that sent a chill through Marcus's body. Under source was written Nightshade Operation, Subject K97. Conditioning failed. Return for processing. An address in Blackwater Industrial Park was listed below it. What the hell is Nightshade? Marcus demanded. Ryder, who had remained silent, finally spoke. I don't know details. I just do what I'm told. But I know enough to be scared. These people, they're not small minus time. They have connections everywhere. Police, local government, business. They're using the shelter as a front, Marcus realized aloud. For what? Animal trafficking? Sometimes, Ryder admitted reluctantly. But that's not all. Some animals come in for processing. Others for conditioning. I don't ask questions. The money keeps this place running, keeps the regular strays fed and housed. Marcus's disgust must have shown on his face because Ryder suddenly looked defensive. You think I'm the villain here? Without their funding, hundreds of animals would be euthanized every year. I made a deal with the devil to save the ones I could. And Duke? What was planned for him? Ryder shook his head. I don't know. The note said conditioning failed, that's all I know. He was supposed to be picked up last week, but no one came. Then you showed up. Marcus stuck the folder under his arm. I'm taking this. And you're both coming down to the station to make formal statements. You can try, Ryder began. I can and I will, Marcus interrupted. Either cooperate now, or I'll come back with a warrant and a team to tear this place apart board by board. As if to punctuate his words, the sound of tires on gravel announced Nora's arrival. She'd agreed to meet him at the shelter after her research, and her timing couldn't have been better. The drive to the police station was tense, with Ryder and Lena in separate vehicles. Marcus called ahead to ensure they would be processed properly, their statements taken by officers he trusted. This case felt too big, the connections potentially reaching too far, to risk information leaking before they understood what they were dealing with. While Ryder and Lena were being questioned, Nora spread her findings across a conference room table. Pine Haven receives consistent donations from a foundation called Oak Ridge Community Partners, she explained, pointing to bank statements. Looks legitimate on paper, but when I dug deeper, OCP is a shell company. It's connected to several properties in Blackwater Industrial Park, including this one. She pointed to an address that matched the one on Duke's intake form. Officially, it's registered as a storage facility. But their utilities usage suggests otherwise high electricity consumption, specialized ventilation systems. Whatever they're doing there, it's not storage. Marcus stared at the aerial view of the warehouse. Something about it seemed vaguely familiar, though he couldn't place why. What about Nightshade? He asked. Any mention of that? Nora shook her head. Nothing concrete. But there have been whispers in the criminal underworld about an operation with that name. High-level, very secretive. There were rumors they were involved in everything from drugs to weapons to human trafficking, but nothing ever stuck. Marcus looked at Duke, who lay beside his chair, watching them with attentive eyes. And somehow, Duke got caught in the middle of it all. Not by accident, Nora said quietly. Think about it, Marcus. A highly trained police canine disappears during a drug raid. 3 years later, he turns up with signs of systematic conditioning. What if Duke wasn't collateral damage in that raid? What if he was the target all along? The implication hit Marcus like a physical blow. You were saying they wanted him? Why? A fully trained police canine would be valuable to the right people. Drug detection, tracking, protection skills that could be repurposed. But Duke was loyal to you. The conditioning was probably meant to break that loyalty, to make him obedient to new handlers. But it failed, Marcus finished, understanding dawning. That's what the note meant. They couldn't break him. Nora nodded. And when conditioning fails, they process the asset. That's why he was still at the shelter. He was waiting for execution. Marcus felt sick. He had been mourning Duke for 3 years, believing him dead, while his partner had been enduring unimaginable suffering. And through it all, Duke had held on to something essential: his training, his spirit, perhaps even his memory of Marcus refusing to be broken. We need to move on this warehouse, Marcus said decisively. Tonight. We should wait for backup, Nora cautioned. If this is really Nightshade, we're talking about a major criminal organization. We need a tactical team, warrants. We don't have time, Marcus scud her off. They know Duke is missing from the shelter by now. They'll clear out that warehouse before we can get warrants. We need to go tonight, do reconnaissance at least. If we find evidence, then we call in the cavalry. Nora hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. You're probably right. But we go in smart. Observation only. The minute we confirm illegal activity, we call for backup. Marcus agreed, though something in him, the same instinct that had made him stop at the shelter gate, told him that things wouldn't be that simple. As darkness fell over Oak Ridge Harbor, Marcus found himself once again facing a choice about Duke's safety. Logic said to leave the German Shepherd at home to recover. But something deeper, something that recognized the justice owed to his partner, told him Duke needed to be there. What do you think, boy? Marcus asked, kneeling beside Duke's bed. One more mission together? Duke's response was immediate. He rose to his feet, still favoring his injured leg but standing tall, his eyes clear and focused. In that moment, Marcus saw beyond the scars and the suffering to the loyal officer that still lived within Duke's heart. Let's go find some answers. Into darkness. The Blackwater Industrial Park sat like an island of shadows at the edge of town. A collection of warehouses and abandoned factories that had once been the economic center of Oak Ridge Harbor. Now it stood as a monument to changing times, empty buildings and cracked concrete slowly being reclaimed by nature. Marcus parked his unmarked vehicle a safe distance away, the warehouse in question barely visible through the evening mist trolling in from the harbor. Beside him, Nora checked her weapon and radio, her expression grim. Remember, reconnaissance only, she reminded him. We document what we can, then call it in. In the back seat, Duke sat alert, his ears forward, body tense with anticipation. Despite his injuries, There was something transformed about him now. The passive, traumatized dog from the shelter replaced by the trained officer Ray Minus emerging from beneath the scars. As they approached the warehouse on foot, keeping to the shadows, Marcus felt a growing sense of familiarity. The layout of the buildings, the view of the distant harbor. He had been here before. This area, he whispered to Nora. It borders the shipping yards where Duke disappeared. Nora's eyes widened slightly. They could have taken him directly from the raid. A short distance to transport him without being seen. The warehouse itself appeared inactive at first glance. No vehicles in the parking area, no visible lights from outside. But as they circled the perimeter, Duke's behavior changed. He stiffened, a low growl rumbling in his throat, his eyes fixed on a loading dock door that stood slightly ajar. He recognizes this place, Marcus said softly, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Moving closer, they detected the low hum of generators from inside. A faint light spilled from the gap in the door, barely enough to confirm the building wasn't abandoned. Marcus peered through the narrow opening. The interior was dimly lit, revealing stacks of crates and what appeared to be chain-link kennels along one wall. The space seemed empty of people, but a door at the far end glowed with light from another room beyond. There are animals in there, he whispered to Nora. I can hear them. Duke's growl deepened, his body tense as if ready to spring forward. Marcus placed a restraining hand on him. Easy, boy. We do this right. Nora pulled out her phone, taking photos through the gap. This is enough to justify a warrant, she said quietly. We should fall back, call it in. A sharp crack from behind cut her words short. Marcus spun around, hand moving to his weapon, just as headlights swept across the parking area. A black SUV pulled up to the building, its engine purring to a stop. Get back, Marcus hissed, pulling Nora and Duke deeper into the shadows beside the loading dock. 3 men emerged from the vehicle. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see they were armed, not obviously, but the telltale bulges beneath jackets were unmistakable to a trained eye. They moved with purpose toward a side door, one speaking quietly into a radio. They're doing a sweep, Nora whispered. Standard security protocol. We need to move, Marcus replied. If they find us here. Duke suddenly stiffened beside him, his attention locked on one of the men. A low rumble began in his chest, building to a growl that Marcus couldn't silence. The nearest man turned sharply, hand moving inside his jacket. Check the perimeter, he barked to the others. We've got company. Everything happened at once. The men drew weapons. Nora called for backup into her radio. And Duke Loyal, wounded, unbreakable Duke launched himself from the shadows toward the man who had drawn first. The attack caught the man off minus guard, sending him crashing to the ground with Duke's teeth firmly locked on his wrist. The weapon clattered away across the pavement. Police. Drop your weapons, Marcus shouted, his service pistol already drawn as he moved to cover Nora. Instead of complying, the other men opened fire. Marcus and Nora dove for cover behind a dumpster, bullets spinging off metal. Duke had released his target and also taken cover, moving with the instincts of his training despite years away from service. We need to get inside, Marcus called to Nora over the gunfire. The loading dock, it's our best chance. She nodded, providing covering fire, as Marcus made a break for the partially open door. Duke followed, moving with surprising speed despite his injuries. Nora came last, bullets chasing her retreat. Inside, Marcus quickly assessed their situation. The warehouse interior offered more cover crates, equipment, shadows to hide their movements. But they were also trapped until backup arrived, with armed hostiles between them and the exit. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before backup gets here," Nora said, checking her ammunition. "We just need to hold out." A pained whine from Duke drew Marcus's attention. In the better light of the warehouse interior, he could see blood on the German Shepherd's flank, a bullet graze. Not serious but clear evidence that Duke had put himself in harm's way once again. "You crazy, brave dog," Marcus whispered, quickly examining the wound. "Always protecting, aren't you?" Duke's response was to lick Marcus's hand once, then turn his attention back to the warehouse, ears forward, every muscle tense with alertness. Whatever pain he felt, duty came first. Something about Duke's focus made Marcus look more carefully at their surroundings. The kennels he had glimpsed from outside weren't just holding random animals. They contained dogs specifically, large breeds with the lean, muscular builds of working dogs. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Dobermans, all breeds commonly used in police and military work. "Nora," he whispered urgently. "Look at this. They're collecting working dogs." Before she could respond, the door at the far end of the warehouse opened. Light spilled into the main area as more figures entered. All man in an expensive suit, followed by someone Marcus recognized instantly: Calvin Ryder from the shelter. "Find them," the suited man ordered, his voice cold and precise. "The officer and his dog are top priority. The woman is expendable." Ryder looked terrified. "This wasn't supposed to happen, Mr. Blackwood." The shelter operation was clean. "Yet here we are," the man Blackwood cut him off sharply. "Your incompetence has compromised years of work. Subject K97 was supposed to be processed days ago." Subject K97. Duke's designation in the files. Marcus felt his blood run cold as the pieces clicked into place. Blackwood continued, unaware of their hidden presence. "We'll have to accelerate the timetable. Move all viable assets to the secondary location. Anything that can't be transported will need to be eliminated." "What about the police officer?" Ryder asked nervously. Blackwood's expression hardened. "An unfortunate accident during a break-in. Nothing connects him to us officially." He checked his watch impatiently. "You have 30 minutes before this place is nothing but ashes. I suggest you make the most of them." As Blackwood exited through another door, Ryder began frantically issuing orders to the armed men who had followed them inside. "We need to stop them," Marcus whispered to Nora. "They're going to destroy everything, including the dogs." "Backup is still at least 5 minutes out," she replied grimly. "And we're outnumbered." Duke nudged Marcus's hand, his eyes fixed on his handler's face with an intensity that transcended words. In that moment of connection, Marcus understood. Duke hadn't just survived his ordeal, he had been waiting for this moment. For justice. For a chance to make meaning from his suffering. "You're right," Marcus told him softly. "We finish this together." The decision made, Marcus outlined a quick plan. Nora would work her way around to the kennels to begin releasing the dogs. He and Duke would create a diversion, drawing attention away from her and toward the main entrance where backup would arrive. "Be careful," Nora warned as they prepared to split up. "That Blackwood guy didn't get to where he is by being careless." Marcus nodded, then turned to Duke. "Ready for one last mission, partner?" Duke's response was to stand at attention, eyes forward, ready for the command. Despite everything, he was still the same loyal, courageous officer he had been trained to be. "Go," Marcus whispered. The next moments unfolded in controlled chaos. Duke burst from cover with a thunderous barking that echoed through the warehouse, drawing immediate attention. Marcus used the diversion to take a position with clear sightlines, calling out police. "Everyone on the ground now." The armed men scattered for cover, returning fire. In the confusion, Nora slipped unnoticed toward the kennels. Duke moved with shocking efficiency despite his injuries, years of training overriding physical limitations as he herded the armed men away from Nora's position. Marcus provided covering fire, careful to keep the exchanges controlled. They didn't need to win this fight, just hold out until backup arrived. But Ryder, panicking, made a break for a side exit. Duke spotted the movement and changed course, intercepting the shelter manager before he could escape. The sight of Duke cornering Ryder created an opening. Two of the armed men redirected their attention, taking aim at the German shepherd. Marcus saw the threatened moves without thinking, exposing himself to protect his partner. A searing paint tore through his shoulder as a bullet found its mark, sending him stumbling behind a stack of crates. Duke, seeing his handler hit, abandoned his pursuit of Ryder. With a growl that seemed to contain 3 years of pent-up fury, he launched himself at the shooter. The man went down hard under 90 pounds of focused canine determination, his weapon skittering across the concrete floor. Through the haze of pain, Marcus saw Nora had reached the kennels and begun releasing the dogs. Some cowered in fear, but others, the ones whose training had survived whatever conditioning Nightshade had attempted, emerged alert and responsive. The tide of the battle shifted as the freed dogs, sensing the situation, moved to defend the humans who had released them. Years of training couldn't be entirely erased, and in this moment of chaos, their instincts to protect reasserted themselves. The wail of sirens outside announced the arrival of backup. The remaining armed men, realizing they were outnumbered, threw down their weapons. Ryder, cornered by a Doberman whose hackles stood on end, didn't even attempt to run. As officers flooded into the warehouse, Marcus leaned against a crate, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. Duke appeared at his side, limping badly now but refusing to rest, his body positioned protectively in front of his injured handler. "Good boy," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion and pain. The best partner anyone could ask for. In the aftermath, as paramedics tended to his wound and officers secured the scene, Marcus learned that Nora had found more than just dogs in the kennels. The back rooms contained detailed records of Nightshade's Operation Ace, a sophisticated network that trained and sold specialized working dogs to criminal enterprises around the country. Dogs with police or military training were particularly valuable. Their skills were purposed for drug operations, personal protection, or worse. The evidence was overwhelming. Computer records revealed connections to criminal operations in multiple states. Financial trails led to offshore accounts. And most damning of all, video files documented the conditioning process, the systematic breaking of dogs' wills to serve new masters in criminal enterprises. Blackwood had escaped in the chaos, but with the evidence secured, it would only be a matter of time before he was found. Ryder and several others were in custody, already offering to cooperate in exchange for leniency. As the paramedics prepared to transport Marcus to the hospital, he refused to be separated from Duke. "He comes with me," he insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "He's my partner." The female paramedic looked from Marcus to Duke, who sat vigilant beside the stretcher, and nodded her understanding. "He can ride up front." Duke, however, had other ideas. As they began to move the stretcher, he limped alongside it, his body pressed against the rails as if to say he wasn't leaving Marcus's side again, not for a moment, not for anything. Okay. The paramedic relented with a small smile. He can stay with you. But we need to have the vet meet us at the hospital. He needs treatment too. As they loaded both man and dog into the ambulance, Marcus reached down to rest his uninjured hand on Duke's head. The German shepherd leaned into the touch, amber eyes meeting Marcus's gaze with a depth of understanding that transcended words. In that moment, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. The road home had been long and brutal, but they had found their way back to each other. And that, despite everything, was enough. The healing path. 6 months passed. Spring came to Oak Ridge Harbor, bringing with it renewal and fresh beginnings. In Marcus's backyard, Duke lay stretched out on the warm grass, his coat once again thick and glossy, the visible scars faded to silver lines that told a story of survival against impossible odds. Marcus sat near by an Adirondack chair, his coffee cooling beside him as he watched Duke bask in the simple pleasure of sunshine. His own shoulder had healed well, though occasional stiffness in damp weather served as a reminder of that night at the warehouse. The investigation into Nightshade had grown far beyond what either of them could have imagined. The organization's tentacles had reached into police departments, local governments, and businesses across 3 states. Arrests were still being made, with new connections uncovered weekly. Victor Blackwood had been found 2 months after the warehouse raid, attempting to flee the country on a private yacht. He now awaited trial on dozens of charges, facing the prospect of spending the rest of his life behind bars. The animals recovered from the warehouse had been placed in specialized rehabilitation programs. Some, too traumatized to return to service, had been retired to loving homes. Others, like Duke, had proven remarkably resilient. Dr. Works. Patel had called it a miracle. Most animals don't come back from that kind of systematic abuse, she had told Marcus during one of Duke's checkups. They break mentally, emotionally. But Duke, he held on to something that kept him whole inside. Marcus knew what that something was. It was the same force that had kept him going through 3 years of grief, the unbreakable bond between them. Duke hadn't just been waiting to be rescued. He had been fighting to return home. The sound of the garden gate opening drew Marcus from his thoughts. Detective Nora Chen walked in, carrying a folder and wearing the satisfied expression of someone bearing good news. Duke lifted his head, tail thumping a greeting against the grass. Since the warehouse, he had accepted Nora as part of their team, forming a connection that seemed based on mutual respect for having fought side by side. "Don't get up," she said, waving Marcus back into his seat as he started to rise. "I just stopped by to share the latest." She handed him the folder, settling into the chair beside him. "The DA's office has finished processing the evidence from Blackwood's personal devices. It's the missing piece we needed: direct connections between him and the original drug operation from 3 years ago." Marcus opened the folder, scanning the contents with growing amazement. "He ordered the raid to be hit?" "Why?" "Distraction," Nora explained, reaching down to scratch Duke behind the ears. The drug operation was real, but it was small minus time compared to what Nightshade was building. The raid created chaos that allowed them to grab Duke without raising immediate alarms. By the time things settled, the trail was cold. Marcus shook his head, still struggling to comprehend the scale of the operation. All this for trained dogs? Not just dogs. Knowledge. Tactics. Inside information on police operations. Nora gestured toward Duke. Think about what a trained canine knows: drug hiding spots, patrol patterns, officer behaviors. In the right hands, that intelligence is worth millions. And the dogs themselves, retrained for criminal enterprises. Priceless assets. The thought made Marcus's blood run cold. Duke had been targeted not just for his skills, but for the insights he could provide into police operations. It was methodical, calculated, and it would have worked if Duke hadn't been so fundamentally loyal. "How many others?" he asked quietly. Nora's expression sobered. "We've identified at least 12 canine officers that went missing across the country over the past 5 years. We're still connecting the dots, but it seems Duke wasn't just the first to make it back home." Duke, as if sensing the gravity of the conversation, rose from his spot and moved to sit beside Marcus's chair, leaning his weight against his handler's leg. The simple pressure was grounding, a reminder that despite the darkness they had uncovered, they had found their way back to the light. "There's something else," Nora continued, her voice softening. "The chief wants to know if you and Duke are ready to come back. Not for regular patrol, at least not yet. But there's a new unit forming, focused on animal crimes and trafficking. You'd be perfect for it." Marcus looked down at Duke, searching those intelligent amber eyes for an answer. "What do you think, partner? Ready to get back to work?" Duke's response was immediate: ears forward, posture alert, a small whine of anticipation that needed no translation. Marcus laughed, feeling a lightness that had been absent for too long. "I think that's a yes." As Nora left with promises to finalize the details, Marcus remained in the backyard with Duke, watching the afternoon sun filter through the budding trees. The path forward wasn't without challenges. Duke still had moments of withdrawal, times when a sudden noise or unfamiliar situation would trigger memories of his captivity. Marcus still woke sometimes from nightmares of searching endless docks, calling a name that echoed unanswered. But they were healing together. Each day brought new progress, new moments of connection that built upon the foundation of trust that had survived against all odds. Marcus reached down to stroke Duke's head, fingers tracing the scar above his eye that would always remain. "We made it, boy," he said softly. "We found our way home." Duke looked up at him, and in those clear amber eyes, Marcus saw everything that needed saying: loyalty beyond reason, courage beyond measure, and love beyond words. Some bonds couldn't be broken, not by time or distance or cruelty. Some partnerships were simply meant to endure. As the afternoon light faded into evening, man and dog remained side by side, guardians of each other's hearts, ready to face whatever came next together. The deeper meaning of loyalty. The story of Marcus and Duke isn't just about a man and his dog finding each other against impossible odds. It's about the extraordinary capacity for loyalty that exists in the relationship between humans and canines, a bond that has evolved over thousands of years, yet remains one of the most profound connections in our lives. Duke's unwavering spirit in the face of systematic attempts to break him speaks to something fundamental about the canine heart. Dogs don't just serve us. They choose us again and again, even when that choice brings pain. Their loyalty isn't conditional on comfort or convenience. It persists through hardship, separation, and even cruelty. This kind of loyalty reminds us of what we're capable of at our best. In a world that often celebrates self-interest and pragmatic relationships, the dog offers an alternative vision: steadfast commitment that doesn't calculate cost or benefit. Duke didn't survive and escape because it was logical or advantageous. He persevered because his heart recognized where he belonged, with the person who had earned his trust and given him purpose. There's wisdom in this perspective. Human relationships increasingly mirror our consumer habits, easily discarded when inconvenient, replaced when something better comes along. We upgrade friendships and partnerships as we would smartphones, always seeking the newer model with better features. Against this backdrop, the dog stands as a gentle rebuke, demonstrating that true loyalty creates something more valuable than momentary satisfaction. It builds unshakable foundations that support us when everything else falls away. The scars that mark Duke's body tell another important story about resilience in the face of trauma. Like many survivors, Duke carried visible reminders of his suffering. But he refused to be defined by what was done to him. His identity remained intact beneath the scars, his purpose undiminished. In reuniting with Marcus, Duke didn't just reclaim his past. He transformed his suffering into meaning by helping bring down the very organization that had hurt him. This transformation of pain into purpose offers a powerful model for human resilience. Our wounds, like Duke's scars, need not be hidden away as sources of shame. They can become testimony to our capacity to endure, to overcome, and ultimately to use our experience, 7 painful ones, in service of something larger than ourselves. Perhaps most striking is how Duke's story challenges our understanding of communication and connection. Despite lacking human language, Duke conveyed everything that mattered through his actions, his presence, his unwavering attention to the person who had earned his trust. They communicate in a vocabulary of shared experience, mutual protection, and consistent presence. Their bond wasn't maintained through text messages or social media updates during their 3-year separation. It survived in muscle memory, in scent recognition, in the ineffable something that draws two beings together across time and distance. This teaches us something vital about human connection as well. Our deepest relationships aren't built primarily through words, but through reliability, through showing up, through the accumulated evidence that we counted on when it matters most. Duke couldn't promise Marcus anything in words, but his actions returning to find his handler, protecting him despite his own injury, spoke volumes about commitment. In our increasingly fragmented society, where loneliness has become a public health crisis, even as our communication tools multiply, the human-canine bond offers a template for what meaningful connection looks like: present, attentive, consistent, and brave enough to risk vulnerability. The road home is rarely straight or easy for dogs or humans. We all face detours, obstacles, and wounds along the way. But Duke's journey reminds us that finding our way back to where we belong, to the relationships and purposes that give our lives meaning, is always worth the struggle. And sometimes the scars we accumulate on that journey become not symbols of damage, but badges of honor, testaments to the unbreakable spirit that carried us home. Thank you for watching this story of Duke and Marcus, a tale of loyalty beyond limits and the incredible bond between humans and their canine companions. We'd love to hear about your experiences with dogs who have shown extraordinary loyalty or helped you through difficult times. Has a dog ever changed your life in a profound way? How has your relationship with a canine companion taught you about resilience, loyalty, or unconditional love? Please share your stories in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming and inspirational tales about the amazing animals who share our lives and teach us how to be more fully human. Your support helps us continue bringing these stories to light, celebrating the extraordinary bond between people and their pets.